There's a line in the Bible that has impacted me on many occasions. And it's very simple. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And two important parts. The earth is the Lord's. Interpret that as you will. In a sense, it implies that it doesn't belong to you personally. It has ownership. And the fullness thereof, meaning something defines fullness mostly as opposed to emptiness or nothingness. And fullness, the experience of fullness, is an experience of the earth and of the Lord's ownership, or of some greater content that is, in a sense, sharing it with you or loaning it to you. It is not yours, but you will know it as it is in its fullness. I was going to pick up the newspaper the other morning at the end of our driveway on a cold winter morning. And I had been feeling for much of the week a kind of emptiness, which I've described to you all a bit during the last series of talks, kind of emptiness bordering on despair, which kind of is confusing to me because I've had such an enormous sense of fullness. And I bent down to pick up the paper in a little blue wrapper, plastic wrapper, double wrapped. And I turned around to face my house, and the whole world, if you will, the whole environment I was in, the whole of you, everything just came flooding into me. And the line, the fullness thereof, hit me. And I knew I was once again in the presence of fullness. I don't know why it was empty going out the driveway and why it turned into fullness on the way back. But it was so powerful and so filled me in the house when I walked in it. And then I saw Blanche, and, you know, what do you do with fullness? Well, you can't contain it. And it just surrounded her and surrounded us and surrounded all the rooms and the windows and the snowy landscape. And I felt so alive, so grateful to be alive, to be full, and so happy to be rid of emptiness, the despairing emptiness. And I realized, of course, that wanting one over the other is problematic. It creates a very strong dualistic reality. Wanting to hold on to fullness is a delusional state, because everything about life tells us that it fills and empties, have and lose. That's what it is. That's the nature of reality. But reality includes emptiness and fullness. And that when you experience emptiness, it will be a doorway to profound appreciation of what it means to be full. Blanche and I were talking about the plants she has in the sunroom, which are so beautiful. And they flower like you can't imagine. And when you walk in the room and these beautiful flowers appear, the fullness is amazing. But much of the time, there's no flowers. It's just greenery. They feel empty, like they're not producing, they're not delivering. But they are part of a process that keeps on delivering. It brings the floral expanse into our lives, the beauty, the color, the red, the pink, and then it goes away. And if we sit around bemoaning its loss and waiting for it to come, you miss a half of the process, the loss part of the process, the not present part of the process, the no flower part of the process. And yet you miss that it's a green, thriving, beautiful plant. Still needs to be watered, cared for, debugged every so often, moved inside and outside. And it keeps coming back with this unbelievable foliage. And that really is what our lives are. And I have really begun to understand, if that's the right word, accept may be better, the emptiness. It's so painful if you react to it. It's so painful. Loss and emptiness are what we fight against. They're what cause grief and sadness. And yet, they are inevitable. They are part of the totality. It is a breathing, coming together and expanding and condensing on and on and on. The process continues. And if you only like half of that process, you are doomed to suffering. Because you will always be in a state of having and losing. And the larger picture, of course, is having the fullness of life and then losing it in diminishment, slowly, maybe quickly, loss. The fullness disappears. So in a way, the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. That's when you can appreciate its magnificent, overwhelming quality of being. But it does not deny that the loss of all of that is also the Lord's, if you will. It's part of what is. And learning to be part of that, to accept that, seems to be at the core of this spiritual journey we're on. Because if we keep waiting for the reward of spirituality, meaning constant presence, constant fullness, that may arrive on some level. It may arrive in a subterranean sense in which you go, aha, I get it, which may be the ultimate teaching, that fullness is not a holding, it is a recognition that fullness includes emptiness, that the whole of it is what we are reaching for. Reaching may also be the wrong word, what we are already present in. That the real spiritual journey is not to hold on to and have the fullness, it's to be present with the process of fullness and emptiness coming and going as the totality. And I will tell you, as I'm sure you already know, when it expresses its fullness, it is beyond measure, exquisite, full of awe, sensations of gratitude and love and joy that are exquisite. And then when those start to dissipate, they're part of your mind will go, how do I get that back? And as you do that, you create this mechanism that you call you. The thing that wants to have, wants to maintain, wants to sustain, wants to not have suffering, not deal with loss. And you create this false identity, possibly as a spiritual component that says, now I've done the right things, I can have bliss and fullness forever. Maybe I cannot tell you there's no truth to that. My experience, for better, for worse, is that it comes and goes. That it is a breathing, an expansion and a contraction that seems to go on all the time. And the lesson that I have learned is the more I let go of desiring one over the other, the more I allow the emptiness to be there and not react to it, the more I become liberated in a sense, because I don't become that which searches to have and be given, but I become that which is both given and loss, having and not having, all continually in motion, often at the same time. In truth, poignancy is having and losing simultaneously. All I can tell you is that this journey for me is recognizing the part of my being that reacts to loss as pain and suffering. And that's becoming further and further expanded in my sense of being, so that my loss of self, of Bruce, allows me to go to the edges of suffering and then go, nope, not going there. Not going to do the person who fears and hates loss. I will observe it, I will experience it, I will bow down before it, because it's such a huge definition of this Bruce psyche. It's old, it's childlike, it's very, very large. And the more I surrender, let go of my attachment to loss, rather than let it define me, what happens is I just see it. And I see the part that doesn't want and the part that wants, and they're very expanded. And what I try to do is go, okay. Okay. It's a kind of journey into acceptance. It's a journey that really has to let go of this desire to hold on to the desirable and to let go of the undesirable, and to find your way into the aso moment that really is ultimately the thing that frees us from one thing or the other. And it brings you toward this liberation of ego-minded striving. The opening to that possibility can occur in various ways. You can open your heart to that. You can open your mind to that. You can open your gut to that. And you can go, okay. But that opening can be very shallow and go, okay, I can do that. And it has very little permanence. It has very little indelible aspect. It just kind of wafts in and out. Or you can do the work that Rudy called, which has a signature of effort over time or depth over time. And what happens is the opening of your mind to this possibility of accepting everything, opening your heart to that, opening your gut to that. The work is doing it deeply. The shallow version of opening works for a few minutes or a few hours and it feels good. But then the bigger onslaughts come, the real sense of loss. And as I say almost weekly, age is a real defining element of loss and dissolution. You have to begin to say yes to something very, very large and inevitable, the loss of all things. It's no longer something down the road and in the future. It's right there. At any moment, loss can occur. It can be still unraveling slowly, or it can be instantaneous. But loss is a part of what we have to deal with. And if you haven't dealt with it in depth, the superficial nature of your dealing will show itself to you rather quickly. And that demands that you work harder. That demands that this spiritual journey you are on take greater primacy. And the primacy is fight for depth. Ask to go deeper. Ask to surrender more. Let go of those boundaries that are saying no to loss and death and fear of inevitability. If you really want this journey to work, it's not about finding your way to heaven and finding your way to joy and endless bliss, as far as I'm concerned. It's finding your way to this enormous acceptance of the yin and yang of human reality. We are in this exceedingly powerful fullness, emptiness contingence. It moves back and forth. Maybe it ends in fullness completely. Maybe it ends in emptiness completely. If there's something reacting to that, you're going to end up in that space, feared, frightened of the emptiness, or feeling blessed that you finally arrived at the fullness. My feeling, if there's anything reacting at all, that's the part you work on. And it will go deeper and deeper. As I've said last week, I think it goes into almost childlike aspect because a lot of stuff is not dealt with from that period. And you go into all those spaces and you just bow down and you go, thy will be done. Thy will be done. The big question that has come up for me, and of course I'm not alone in it, especially in the despairing, dark emptiness moments, where I see darkness and I see evil and I see all of these things playing out in the world around me, as opposed to love and birth and joy. I see some awfulness in behaviors of the people in the world. And the question that comes up is why? Why? Why these behaviors? Why this existence at all? And when you get really, really into emptiness and kind of despair, the why becomes very big. And as far as I can tell, there's no answer. It just does not exist. This is the why. This is the manifestation of the why. You can find mental pictures that will give you some answers, if you will. You can also go to the dogma of many religions with all the whys and all the answers. And every one of them has a different set of answers, and you can buy into whatever dogma you want. Some of them will feel right to you, some will feel wrong to you. But you can choose a why. Or you can begin to experience this thing where there is no why that the human mind can comprehend. It may be there, it may not be there. But the only answer that I keep coming up with, and it's not really an answer, but it seems really viable and important, the fullness thereof. That, I don't know what to make of that answer, but I know when I picked up my newspaper and I turned around and I saw the world, questions and answers went out the window. I felt the fullness. I felt the presence of that fullness. And I cannot tell you that I understood it, but I knew it. And I knew that I was one with that in some fundamental way. I know through various dogma and teaching that I am that we are all that, and that thing has, when it expresses itself, a kind of beauty that is indescribable, a kind of truth, a kind of aspect of kindness and goodness that I talk about weekly now. It seems to be part of the fullness. So what is the emptiness? Why? What is its purpose? Well, again, there's a lot of religious teachings that can help you. I tend to think personally the Buddhist teachings are very powerful in that regard, kind of how to live your life, how to have good thoughts, how to have good action, how to be an appropriate human being. I find those wonderful, wonderful teachings. I have discovered for myself that you can try to be those things, kind-hearted, loving being, or what has unfolded for me as I have gone deeper into my psyche is that there is a guidance and a directive that comes from deep inside, so you have to go deep, that creates goodness and kindness as behavior. It creates a certain kind of thought pattern that is very awakening and enlightening. It does not give you the answers, like this is what it is. It just says beauty, truth, love, kindness, goodness. And it is shocking how much that satisfies. It's not 100%, and I will tell you, I've said this way too many times, you will experience, in the Christ-like sense, abandonment. You will experience, why have you abandoned me? Meaning, suddenly nothing will make sense. There will be no answers. Emptiness will be everywhere. And all I can tell you is if you experience that and you react to it, ask yourself, who is reacting? Who is reacting to that? Because that will show you the edges and the boundaries of your defined self. And if you can breathe into that and relax it, you will go deeper into not knowing, but into being itself. This is a remarkable process. It's a remarkable journey. I cannot speak to you from the end of that journey because I'm not exactly there. I can only tell you I have my flashlight walking through the cave, and I'm telling you, take this step, take that step. We're going to be okay. It's still good. That's all I really can do. And if you're looking for more than that, then go to some other teacher, because I think there are teachers who probably promulgate, some wonderful ending, heaven, whatever, pure bliss, pure may. And I don't say that's not there. It's not that it's not true. It could well be true. I only know that reality for me is becoming very personal and very simple. Part of what's going on in our world right now, like if you watch any kind of news or media, is the fracturing of reality. What is real? Unbelievable belief systems crowding into our culture that are so out there. And I have, close friends who have become, QAnon. I have no idea what to make of the madness that goes into that. I just know that I am not going into that fracturing of truth. I am going into the stillness and the simplicity and the depth of what I find when I sit still and when I experience the fullness thereof. I think each of us is going to have to find the inner guide, the inner voice that helps us through this. And if you don't find that for yourself and you look to the outer dogma, you're still going to be controlled by outside forces that will not take care of you in the extreme. The extreme is when you go deep inside and everything goes away. When it's empty, that's the extreme. And that's when you need to find this whisper of a voice that goes, keep going. It's okay. Open. Let go. Surrender. Trust. I love the word trust over the word faith. They're not that dissimilar, but trust is really active. And trusting this process seems to be all we have. And that trust is not mental necessarily. It's not emotional. It's not even a gut level thing. It's kind of full-bodied. It says, okay, I can do this. It can be done. It is being done. And to give yourself over to that process, that to me is the core of this practice. So when you're struggling, if you are struggling, and you're looking for guidance and you're looking for truth, probably turn off the news. Don't read the newspaper. Don't talk to anybody. Sit still, ask for help inside to surrender. Get quiet, go deep, and wait for the fullness to show itself. I know it can sometimes take very long times to be available. And there will be periods of great doubt. And what am I doing? And this is crazy. Why am I even bothering? That is what comes up. And it's really hard. And in periods of pain, particularly physical pain, but also emotional pain, there can be real despair of no help. But the one thing to keep asking yourself is, who is responding to this? And let that pattern of being fall away. The responding element is an old pattern of your psyche. Let it fall away. You do not have to know the why of it, just the yes of it, the truth of it. Be with the truth as deeply as you can and let that truth permeate and speak to you and find your own path into not knowing. Trust the journey. Trust it. That's what we're here for. This practice is a doorway to that kind of trust. It is not obviously available to everybody. It's not meant for everybody. It takes a really committed soul to make this kind of a journey. It takes a certain kind of willingness to be full and completely embracing of the universe and the fullness of it, and also to see it all go away without feeling betrayed. It is a tough road. It takes work, effort over time, depth over time. That's the equation. Keep at it. Keep doing it. It pays off. The flowers bloom again. You know, there will be days with no flowers. That's the way it works. There will be days with the leaves off the trees and the sun will come back and the weather will come back. This is the cycle of the experience of life in this world. It's out of kilter right now. We all know that. It's going to stay out of kilter possibly for the rest of our lives. So where will kilter be found? In here. In here. This is balance, harmony, depth, clarity, vision, truth, knowing. This is where you're going to get it. If you get it, you will find your way through the thickets of whatever's coming, you know, climate change, the outer fracturing of what we know to be, what we think to be real and true. You will find a guide that is so simple, so real, so assured, and you will just follow it step by step. You don't have to know more than one step. If it says go right, go right. If it says go left, go left. If it says sit down and take a breath, sit down and take a breath. Follow this thing. If it says pick up your toothbrush, pick up your toothbrush and brush your teeth. Do what it tells you. It is so wise. It is so central to your life. It knows what you must do. Trust it, trust it, trust it. And you will find that you can make your way through the duality of existence and find the whole, the simplicity, the singularity, the oneness of who and what you really are, the fullness thereof. Any question?
I have a question in it.
Talk louder because I don't know who's talking. Daniel?
Yeah, I had a sort of a reference to share and a comment. I mean, a question also. But your whole talk reminded me a lot of, and maybe you're familiar with this William Blake line, which is, he who binds to himself a joy does the winged life destroy, but he who kisses the joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise. Are you familiar with that one?
I've heard it. You know, I can only say that there were a lot of wise people on this planet, and that wisdom is not owned.
Mm.
You know, it just passes through, and that, you know, I truly, you have no idea how little I own of all of what comes through. All I know is I've said yes to this inner voice, and it says, okay, I'm using you. And it speaks. And it said it to William Blake, it said it to a lot of people, you know.
Yeah.
And I do think that it does appear to me that the truly liberating experience is letting go of outer form and outer directive and going to the inner and letting it and be very personal. It can't be something you read and put away as a stockhouse of ideas and thoughts. It ultimately is something that precedes all that. It's just the thing that arises that is the essence of wisdom itself. And it's something you, not that you know, but you are being given by that which somehow manifests us. And I don't pretend to get that, but I like the idea the earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. You know, Rudy talked about the guys upstairs. I like that too. I don't have an ultimate knowledge, but I do know that Blake and many other poets and many other writers and many other communicators and musicians and teachers, all when they really get to that place of knowing, I think you will find a kind of commonality which has something to do with authenticity and egolessness. It's not about them. the them falls apart. That's what I'm witnessing in this journey that I'm taking, is that the walls of the bruise thing keep getting further and further apart, or more and more demolished. And I just watch that, and there's still biological fear, and there's still pain, and there's still all of those things, and they're very hard to deal with, but they are like part of the process. And I don't understand the process, but I know I'm in it. I know there's no reason that I can get for it that makes any sense, but I know as I go through it, something bigger and bigger keeps coming back, which is the flower keeps blooming in the most beautiful way imaginable. The sunrise comes back, the summer returns, and beauty, it revives itself. That's all I know. And I trust.
That's sort of the next part, the question that I had, which is relates to Rudy. From my reading of I never met him, but my reading of what he's written and recorded, kind of archives of of his talks or comments from John Mann and others, or recorded talks. He seemed to speak a lot about this process of death and rebirth spiritually that he would go through, and then he would recognize the pattern, and then because he recognized the pattern, he was able to kind of to deal with it. Like he would sit in his store and drink a lot of tea while people irritated the hell out of him that normally wouldn't irritate him, and he would just like know what was happening, so he wouldn't be as reactive, and he could just kind of like weather the storm, knowing that putting the energy into the rebirth, like putting energy into what was coming into being and not putting energy into what was falling away. And sounds like you're describing something similar, and I don't know if Rudy's experience informs yours or
It's an interesting question. Rudy's been gone 50 years in my life, and he had a 7-year process, and it was obviously foundational and really important. A lot of what Rudy used to talk about, I didn't understand at all. I just could not compute what he was trying to say. But I think there's a lot of alignment in what he was saying. What I've come up with in recent months, and you've heard me talk about it a lot, is non-reactivity, which is sort of what you're describing with Rudy. Just don't react. Just don't let that thing happen. And as you don't let it happen, the reactivity, which is a patterning, starts to lessen, and that part of you starts to disappear. And then you realize half of what you are, if not more, is a reactive pattern to things, programmed when you're very young and throughout your life. When you stop being that program, you stop in a way being you. And then you go, oh, and it's kind of it relaxes you. It means you don't have to be that thing anymore. And it just kind of goes away. But then you go to the reactions you don't expect, which are further afield and often more childish. And you go, oh, that's still there. And so it's a lesson of deepening of detachment until there's just a very simple being witnessing the reality of this and paying deep attention to the direction that one is given in the last years of one's life, or even in the middle years of one's life, in how to behave. And again, 8 Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, those are all very real directives of how to live. They come from outside, but they will ultimately come from inside in each of us. And you will just follow what you're told moment to moment. And I'm telling you, I'm really directed moment to moment at this point. And I think I talk about it every so often, like put down the toilet seat for Blanche. That if there's really something in me that says, think of others, think ahead, do the right thing. And it's, if you just do it and not resent it, it's so liberating. You don't have to think about it. You just become someone who does the right thing and also becomes very aware of other. Other becomes so important in all of this journey, because the other can be a singular person or the world itself. But to become aware of other as more important than you and yourself is incredibly liberating. And you start to live for the other, and it brings joy beyond measure. I cannot explain it, but it is so beautiful. So, these are simple little lessons. They're coming up, and I'm sharing them. I in no way feel like the great teacher. I have absolutely no ego investment in doing this. in saying anything. I'm just told to do it. And if they tell me tomorrow not to do it, or you guys decide not to show up, I am totally at peace, one way or the other. But I will do what I'm told to do, and I do it because honestly, I love you guys. I love you, Daniel, and I really do experience an unbelievable gratitude and connection for your presence. And I could, go across the board here for everybody, but there is real love, and the otherness of your being is like my other side. It's like part of my being of being, and it's beyond wonderful. Thank you. George, did you have a question?
I was just relating to something that Rudy taught me years ago. He brings everything down to the most simplistic way of looking at something. And it was about business. And he said, when you're buying, you're getting energy. We all like to get, but when you're selling, you're giving energy. In order to do one, you had to do the other. And it always resonated with me. And, and that, the way he put things in such a simplistic way was brilliant, actually.
I loved that. And I also know how he said that to you, because he knew how you needed to hear it, because you were a businessman at that moment, like he was in the same business even. And he was a great teacher. He was a great, great teacher, remains one for me. And I don't understand, like I say, all of the the teachings exactly, but I do know that he put something into play that is still operating a half of a century later and having dynamic aspect. And all I can do is go, thank you. I mean, that's the largest thing I can do, to make my gratitude known and to listen to both him and to the channel that channeled through him, that is bigger than Rudy and bigger than all of us, and yet operating as we speak in every one of us. It's an extraordinary thing. It's there in the world. It's available to every person, but you can literally look at every person and tell how much people are listening to it. And it's really fascinating for me because I see so many people who don't hear at all, just do not hear, who are totally flatlining in their brain, listening to their own thoughts, their own mind over and over, has no depth, it has no ultimate content, it has no reach, and it's a terrible place to live. It's really painful. Some of these people you can reach, some you can't. I don't take it as my mission to reach anybody, but I do know it's my job in the presence of anybody to bring that content, to bring that love, that presence, that fullness, and let people bask in it. And if they find that lifts them up, lightens them, opens them up, then great. If it doesn't, I don't know what more I can do. I just serve at God's will, if you will. And that's really that's what Rudy did. That's what we're all capable of doing. And every one of us, if we touch one other person, are serving really well, even if it's just the person we live with. It doesn't matter. There's no goal here. The goal is to be open, available, free, loving, kind, and good to the other, and ultimately, of course, to yourself. And the deeper you can go in your mind so you can reach wisdom, into your heart so you can reach real love, into your gut so you can reach real knowing, you become somebody who's programmed to serve the universe in whatever way the universe finds itself wanting to be served. It may be to masses, it may be to one other person. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. You will do what needs to be done, and you'll be told, and you'll listen and go, yep, okay. That's all it is. So simple. But simple doesn't always sit well with people. So this is a teaching. You can walk away from this. This could be your last teaching. You don't need to know any more than this. Greg was beeping that. That's a signal of sorts. I can do nothing but show up and authentically love you. And I do, and every single one of you. You have no idea. And that love is not personal. it's deeply impersonal, although I get to experience it and process it. So I get to be a beneficiary of it as it passes through. But I do know, because I feel it passing through, the oceanic quality of love that goes to you, that really goes to you. You are worthy of that. You are deeply worthy. And if you pass it on, that's a great gift, rather than try to own it for yourself, which will just inflate you and cause a lot of ultimate discomfort. Pass it on. Anybody, any other question? Okay. So be back in the New York area in 2 weeks. Be in California next week. Thank you for showing up. Really deeply appreciate it, and really know how appreciated you are, and so much love.